So to configure it, most of the configuration parameters have usable defaults, but what you need to do is you need to at least define the nodes in your cluster and grouping them into partitions. There's a web-based tool available that's in the package. You just open it up with a web browser, go through and check buttons and enter things, and at the bottom hit submit, and it will generate a configuration file. You just save that in your system configuration directory that we've defined when we ran configure. And this is just the first page of that configuration tool. Here's an example of a start of the Slurm configuration file. You define the control machine, which is where the Slurm control daemon runs, where your backup runs, what mechanism you use for authentication, if you're caching group information, what tool you use for generating the digital signatures in the job step credentials, what your compute nodes are, and how they're grouped into partitions or queues. Munge is Slurm's default authentication and digital signature mechanism that's outside of Slurm, and you should probably install that in your computer before you try to configure and install Slurm. Each node in the cluster has to be configured with a Munge authentication key, and you need to have the Munge daemons running on those nodes. So the credential includes the user ID number, the group ID, a timestamp, and whatever else is meant to be encrypted. Slurm includes the list of node names allocated to a job or job step. So you could, for example, create a job step and then modify the credential or send it to a node which hasn't been allocated to your job because that's part of that credential. And we also include specific CPUs on each node that are allocated to the job or job step, how much memory, and generic resources that are allocated to it. Basically to keep a job or user from using anything it's not supposed to be using. Slurm includes an extensive test suite that can be used to validate its proper operation. It includes, at last count, 316 test programs. It runs thousands of jobs, tens of thousands of job steps, and basically there's a file in there. Go to the directory test suite expect, create a file called globals.local with installation specific information like where your build directory is and where it's installed, and you can either execute the individual tests or run a script in there called regression that will execute every one of those tests. So here's an example of globals.local file with the information that's relevant here, where Slurm was installed, where it was built, where the source is, and if you execute it, you'll get a running commentary written to the standard out of regression, but it's going to be very verbose. I typically send that standard out to a file, and standard error will include information just about the failures. So that's all you'll see at your screen if you run something like that. So the next thing you want to do is walk through a demonstration of Slurm's configuration, installation, and use. There's a CD that's supplied with this. It'll include the Slurm tarball, which is all of the source code. There'll be several examples of configuration files. There's one to run on a single host, which would be your laptop computer. There's another set of configuration files that will make your laptop or desktop computer look like a Linux cluster that has 4 compute nodes. And there's a emulated Blue Gene Q system. This is the Sequoia system at Livermore with 96 racks. It's a 20 petaflop computer. And there'll also be an emulated Cray XT computer. Each one looks a little bit different, behaves a little bit differently, but this will give you a chance to see how it works on each of those systems. Includes the Slurm web pages, which are also online, obviously, at SchedMD.com, and this tutorial. So the first thing you want to do is create a subdirectory in /temp called Slurm, and the reason why I picked that is this is /temp exists on any Unix system, and I wanted to make the configuration files as easy for you to work with as possible. So all of them have file paths that start with /temp/slurm. If you put it somewhere else, you're certainly welcome to build and install it anywhere else, but if you do, then you're going to have to change all of those paths in the sample configuration files. Next, you want to change directory to that directory you created, move the contents of the CD into there, unpackage the tarball, uncompress the tarball and then unpackage it. In this case, I'm going to suggest you change directory to build Linux, which would build your laptop computer as a standalone machine to be managed by Slurm. There's a script in that directory called config_Linux. If you were to build in the Blue Gene Q or cluster mode, there are equivalent files in each one of them. It's just the paths are a little bit different. And what configure is going to do, again, is it's going to find out what your system looks like, what libraries are there, where they are, where the header files are, and next you want to run the program make -j install. The -j runs the make in parallel, so if you have more than one core on your computer, it will use all of them, so it's a parallel build, and any of the output of the build will go into the file m.o, and any errors will appear at your screen. So this is an easy way to see if there are any errors in actually building the software. There is a configuration file already on the CD, and again, if you use the Linux, the standalone Linux system, go to install and restore Linux /etc, and there'll be a slurm.conf file in there. That's the Slurm configuration file. Now you'll need to change a handful of lines in that file. You'll need to specify the host name of your machine in several places. It's listed in the file as uppercase host name, so it should be pretty obvious what needs to change and where. I think there are 3 lines that need to change, and also you'll need to specify your username in 2 places on that file, and those are Slurm user. And Slurm user is the user name that the Slurm control daemon runs as, and slurmd user is the username that the slurmd daemon runs as. Normally that's root, but for your testing purposes it can just be you. Then you want to change directory to where the daemons are installed, which is the sbin subdirectory. Create a few windows and fire up the daemons. This uses the -d option, uppercase D, so they're started in the foreground. The little c means to clear out previous state, which isn't relevant when you first start, and a V to do verbose logging.